The man had always enjoyed the peaceful life on his ranch, tucked away from the chaos of the city. The rolling hills, the quiet mornings, and the cool breeze through the trees made this place feel like a personal sanctuary. He had worked hard to build it, piece by piece, creating a life here that was free from the pressures of the world. Every morning, he woke up early, just as the first light of dawn touched the sky. He could hear the chirping of birds and the gentle rustling of the trees in the wind. It was his own piece of paradise, and nothing could spoil it. At least, that's what he thought. One morning, he woke up to an unsettling silence. There was no birdsong, no soft breeze, just the quiet of the world outside his window. As he got dressed, something felt off. He couldn't put his finger on it, but there was a strange sense of unease in the air. When he stepped outside, he knew immediately what had changed. A fence. A large, wooden fence had appeared overnight, stretching across the only road that led to his ranch. The sight hit him like a punch in the gut. He stared at it, his heart pounding in his chest. The road he used every single day, the only road that allowed him to get to his property, was completely blocked. A thick, tall wooden fence stood in his way, cutting off his access. His first thought was that it was some sort of mistake. Perhaps the workers had put it up to mark a boundary or for some other reason that could be easily corrected. He immediately went to grab his phone, intending to call the HOA president. But when he dialed the number, there was no answer. His frustration mounted, and with each passing second, his sense of confusion and anger grew. He had tried to reach them before, but now it felt different. It felt deliberate. He called again, but this time, the voicemail picked up. "This is ridiculous," he muttered to himself, pacing around. "What's going on here?" He walked up and down the fence, inspecting it closely, but he couldn't find any signs of what was going on. It wasn't just a simple fence. It was sturdy, professionally built, and it completely blocked the road. No signs, no warning, no note. Nothing to explain why this was happening. He felt like his chest was tightening. He had never seen anything like this before. His ranch had always been his, and now, suddenly, this fence was here, and it was as though he didn't even have the right to drive down his own road. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. This wasn't a simple mistake. This was an act of control. Someone, somewhere, had made the decision to block him from accessing his own property. It had to be the HOA. The more he looked at the fence, the more his anger grew. He hadn't been notified of any changes, any new developments, nothing. He had always paid his dues to the HOA, followed every rule. So why was this happening now? Why this sudden decision to block his access? It wasn't like him to let something like this slide, but something about the situation felt different. The man walked back to his truck, his mind racing with frustration. He couldn't just sit back and wait. He had to get answers. It was the only road that led to his ranch, and now it was blocked without warning. He tried to calm himself as he pulled out of his driveway and made his way to the HOA office. It was only a short drive, but it felt like an eternity. He was so angry that his hands were shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. The closer he got to the office, the more questions ran through his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The HOA had always been a hassle, but this was too much. He pulled into the HOA parking lot, parked his truck, and marched up to the front door. The office was small but neat, with a bright sign outside that read HOA office. He opened the door, the bell ringing softly above his head. The receptionist, a young woman with a stern face, looked up from her desk as he entered. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cold and distant. "I need to speak with the president," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's urgent." She raised an eyebrow but picked up the phone to call the president's office. A few minutes later, she hung up and told him that the president would be with him shortly. The man sat down, waiting, his frustration building by the minute. It felt like the clock was ticking slower than ever before. He had been a good member of this community, paying his dues, following all the rules. And now, the HOA had done something that was going to affect his entire way of life. He wasn't going to let them get away with it. A few moments later, the The door to the president's office opened, and a woman in her late 40s walked out. She was wearing a business suit, her dark hair pulled back into a neat bun. She looked professional but cold, her eyes hard as she scanned him. "You wanted to speak with me?" she asked, her tone flat. The man stood up, walking toward her. "You've blocked my access to my property with a fence," he said, his voice rising with anger. "Why would you do that without any warning or explanation?" The HOA president stared at him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "It's for the safety of the community," she said dismissively. "The fence is a temporary measure." Temporary. The man repeated the word like it was a joke. "This is my land. This is my road, my access. I've never been notified about any changes, and now you've built a fence that cuts me off from my own property." "It's a decision that's been made," she replied calmly, but there was something in her tone that felt like she wasn't telling him everything. "If you have a problem with it, you can take it up with the board." She turned to walk away, but the man grabbed her arm. "No. I want answers now," he demanded. The president turned, her eyes narrowing. "You can't demand answers," she said coldly. "The HOA is in charge of this neighborhood, and we do what we see fit. If you don't like it, there are plenty of other places you can go." His grip tightened, but before he could say anything else, she stepped away from him, walking briskly back to her office without another word. The man stood there for a long moment, stunned by her attitude. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. The HOA president's response, or lack of one, made it clear this was personal. And it wasn't just about a fence. This was a fight for his rights, for his land, and for his future. He wasn't going to let them control him. He had to find a way to stop them. He turned and walked out of the office, his mind racing with possibilities. One thing was clear: this wasn't over. The man's anger only grew as he drove back from the HOA office. The president's cold, dismissive attitude had stung more than he cared to admit. He had gone in hoping for answers, hoping for some sort of explanation, but all he received was a shrug and empty words. She didn't even try to explain why the fence had been put up, why his access had been blocked. Instead, she had brushed him off as though his concern didn't matter. He had always known that the HOA was an organization that loved to throw its weight around, but he hadn't expected this level of disregard for his rights. It made his blood boil. It was more than just the fence. It was about control, about power. The HOA had decided they could do whatever they wanted, regardless of the impact it had on him or anyone else. But he wasn't about to just roll over and accept it. No, he wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not this time. He spent the next few days trying to figure out what his next step should be. His first instinct was to go to the police, but he knew that wouldn't help. The fence wasn't technically illegal, it was on HOA-controlled land, and they had the right to make changes within the community. But that didn't sit right with him. This wasn't just about a fence. It was about a much deeper issue. The HOA had pushed him to the edge, and now it was up to him to find a way to push back. So, he decided to take a different approach. Instead of waiting for the HOA to explain themselves, he started to gather information. He went through his old property records, checked the local zoning laws, and even spoke with some of his neighbors. The more he learned, the clearer it became. The HOA didn't have the right to block his access. Sure, they had some control over the neighborhood's common areas, but his land, his road, was his. He wasn't just being blocked from driving to his property. He was being forced into a position of submission. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that this was part of a bigger plan. The HOA didn't just want to control access to his ranch. They wanted to control everything. The man had seen the signs before, but now it was clear. The HOA president, with her cold demeanor, wasn't just following some rule. She was making a play for power. This wasn't just a small, local dispute. It was a fight for control of the entire neighborhood. He couldn't let that happen. He knew that if he didn't act fast, the HOA would continue to push him around, and eventually, they'd take everything from him. That's when it hit him. He had to act fast, but not with anger or frustration. He had to play it smart. The last thing he needed was to make the situation worse by acting impulsively. He needed to find a way to get the HOA to listen, to make them see that they couldn't just do whatever they wanted. That's when he came up with an idea, a plan that would give him control over the situation. But first, he needed more information. He needed to learn everything he could about the HOA's operations, their plans, and their weaknesses. Over the next few days, he made more calls, spoke to more neighbors, and even did some research on the HOA's legal standing. The more he learned, the more he saw the cracks in their facade. The HOA president's attitude wasn't just arrogance. It was the arrogance of someone who thought they could get away with anything. She thought she could control everything, including him, and she had no idea what he was capable of. Armed with new knowledge, the man decided it was time to take action. He needed to confront the HOA head-on, but this time, he wouldn't just be asking questions. He would be making a statement. He called the HOA office again, this time demanding a meeting with the board. The receptionist seemed hesitant but agreed to set up an appointment. He wasn't sure what he would say yet, but he knew he had to get them in a room together. It was time for them to hear his side of the story. The meeting was scheduled for the following week, and the man spent the days leading up to it preparing. He gathered all his evidence, the property records, the zoning laws, the legal loopholes, and planned to present his case in a way that they couldn't ignore. He knew the HOA would try to talk circles around him, but he had something they didn't: the truth. When the day of the meeting arrived, he walked into the HOA office with confidence. This time, he wasn't intimidated. This time, he was the one in control. As he sat down with the board, he could see the surprise in their eyes. They hadn't expected him to be so prepared, so determined. The HOA president, who had been so dismissive before, seemed a little less sure of herself. The man laid out his case, calmly and clearly, presenting all the evidence he had gathered. He made it clear that he wasn't going to back down. He wasn't going to let them take his land or his peace without a fight. The board listened in silence, exchanging glances as he spoke. When he finished, the president spoke, her tone cooler than before. "We'll take this into consideration," she said, but the man could see the hesitation in her eyes. He had made his point. The board had heard him, and now they knew he wasn't someone they could push around. As he left the office, he felt a sense of accomplishment. He hadn't gotten everything he wanted yet, but he had taken the first step. The HOA hadn't expected this kind of pushback. They had underestimated him. And now, they would know that he wasn't going to let them control him any longer. After his meeting with the HOA board, the man spent the next few days simmering with anger. He had presented his case clearly, but the HOA had just dismissed him with their cold, indifferent response. He knew they had no intention of making things right. They didn't care about his land, his ranch, or the struggles he was facing. They were after something much bigger. The fence blocking his access wasn't just about a dispute over property lines. It was about control. The HOA had made a move, testing how far they could push him. And they were waiting for him to back down. But he wasn't going to let that happen. He couldn't. The longer he let them dictate the terms, the more they would take. If he didn't act now, the HOA would continue to chip away at everything he had worked for. He needed a plan. Not just a plan to deal with the fence, but a plan to make the HOA realize that they had messed with the wrong person. He needed to turn the tables on them, make them feel the pressure. He spent days trying to think of a way to do it. Every time he walked outside and saw the fence blocking his path, his mind raced with ideas. He could sue them, of course, but that would take time, and time was something he didn't have. The HOA was playing a long game, and if he didn't act fast, they would take everything he had. It had to be something quick, something they didn't expect. That's when the idea hit him. He wasn't just going to fight back against the fence. He was going to use it against them. What if he turned the HOA's own gate into a toll road? A private toll road. He could charge for every car that wanted to pass through the gate. He could turn this whole situation into a business venture, one that would not only give him control of the situation but also hit the HOA where it hurt, their wallet. The more he thought about it, the more the idea seemed perfect. The HOA had made the mistake of blocking his access, but he could make it work for him. Instead of being the victim, he could turn their actions into an opportunity. He would charge the people who needed access to the road, and he would do it legally. The HOA couldn't just block his access and expect him to sit back. No, he would take control of the situation and make them pay for their mistake. The idea of turning their gate into a toll road was more than just a plan to make money. It was a statement. A statement that he wouldn't be controlled, that he wouldn't be pushed around. The HOA had underestimated him, and now they would see what happens when they push someone to their limit. He spent the next few days researching everything he could about toll roads, permits, and the local laws that govern such things. He made calls, gathered paperwork, and learned about zoning laws and permits. He made sure that everything he did would be above board. He wasn't trying to break the law. He was just trying to find a way to make the HOA realize that they couldn't get away with this. The more he researched, the more confident he became. This plan could actually work. He could set up a toll system at the gate, charge for access, and keep everything legal. He wasn't going to let the HOA push him around any longer. He was going to make them regret ever putting up that fence. He drew up plans for the toll booths, made a list of the materials he would need, and even figured out how much to charge. He wanted to make it a fair price, something that would get people to pay but wouldn't drive them away. It wasn't about making a fortune. It was about proving a point. It was about taking control back. When everything was ready, he took the next step. He contacted a construction company to build the toll booths and a secure payment system. He also made sure that everything was legally documented and followed the local rules. He wasn't just going to put up a few toll booths and hope for the best. He was going to make sure it was done right. As the construction began, the man couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The first toll booth was being built, and every time he saw the workers installing the equipment, he felt a little bit of hope. It wasn't just about the money, it was about taking control, about showing the HOA that they couldn't just do whatever they wanted. The HOA had thought they could block him, take away his access, and keep him quiet. But now, he was making them pay for that mistake. The workers finished the toll booth within a few days, and it was time to start charging. He set the price, posted clear signs, and opened the toll gate. When the first car pulled up and paid the toll, he felt a rush of excitement. It wasn't just the money, it was the fact that he had taken control of the situation. He had turned their fence into his own asset, something that would not only cover the costs of the toll system but also provide him with a steady income. The first few days were slow, but as word got around, more and more cars began passing through the toll booth. The man's plan was working. The HOA had tried to block his access, but he had turned their actions into an opportunity. He watched as the money began to flow in, and with it came a sense of satisfaction. But the more he made, the more he realized that this wasn't just about the toll road. It was about making a statement to the HOA and everyone else who had ever tried to control him. He wasn't going to back down. He wasn't going to let anyone push him around. And every time a car paid the toll, it was a reminder that he had taken something that the HOA had tried to take from him and turned it into something better. The toll road wasn't just a way to make money, it was a victory. The man's heart raced with anticipation as he watched the toll booths finally complete. The construction crew had worked quickly, and now, his plan was in motion. He had been thinking about this moment for days, even weeks, but now it was real. The gate that had once been a barrier to his ranch, blocking his access and causing him countless headaches, was now a source of potential income. More than that, it was a statement. The HOA had tried to control his life, but now, he was using their own actions against them. He had turned their fence into a profitable toll road, something that would not only fund his ranch but also keep him in control. He stood by the side of the gate as the first car approached. The driver, a local farmer, rolled down his window and paid the toll. The man smiled, his mind racing with the possibilities. This wasn't just about the money. It was about proving a point to the HOA. He wasn't just a victim of their decisions. He was taking back control. As the days passed, more and more cars came through. The first few were a trickle, local residents who were curious about what had happened to the road. But as word spread, the traffic increased. People in the community who had once been skeptical of him were now paying the toll without question. Some were reluctant at first, but as they realized that this was the only way to access their homes, they paid up without complaint. He made sure the toll booth was manned, and he set up a secure system for collecting the payments. Every day, more cars came through, and the money started to add up. He could see it. This toll road wasn't just a temporary fix. It was a way to fight back against the HOA. He wasn't just accepting their decision to block his land. He was turning it into something that worked for him. But even as he felt the satisfaction of the first few days of success, he knew the HOA wouldn't stay quiet for long. They were bound to notice what was happening. And when they did, they would try to stop him. The man wasn't naive. He knew the HOA had money, resources, and a lot of power in the community. They wouldn't like what he was doing, and they would do everything they could to shut him down. But that didn't scare him. The toll road was just the beginning. This was his land, his life, and he wasn't going to let anyone take it from him. The HOA had pushed him to the edge, but now he was pushing back harder than they ever expected. As the toll booth continued to bring in money, the man knew he had to be ready for the HOA's response. They would come after him. They would send their lawyers, threaten him with fines, and maybe even try to take legal action. But he wasn't afraid. He had learned everything he could about the law, and he was prepared to fight back with everything he had. His plan had worked so far, but he couldn't afford to be complacent. The next few days were tense as he waited for the HOA's move. Every car that passed through the toll booth was a small victory, but he knew the real battle was coming. Then, it happened. The HOA sent him a letter. It was formal, legal-sounding, and cold. The letter accused him of violating HOA rules by creating a toll road on HOA-controlled property. They demanded that he remove the toll booths immediately or face legal action. The letter was a thinly veiled threat, trying to bully him into submission. But the man wasn't intimidated. He had expected this. The HOA had always used threats and intimidation to get what they wanted, but he wasn't going to back down this time. He looked at the letter and smiled. It was exactly what he needed. The more the HOA tried to intimidate him, the more determined he became. He wasn't just going to remove the toll booths. He was going to fight back, and he was going to do it on his terms. The next day, he contacted his lawyer and discussed the letter. The lawyer told him to be prepared for the HOA to escalate things, but he also reassured him that he had a strong case. The man had done everything legally. He had checked the zoning laws, the local ordinances, and even the HOA's own rules. The HOA didn't have a legal leg to stand on. Still, the man knew that the HOA would not give up easily. They were a powerful organization, and they had their own lawyers. But this time, it wasn't just about the law. It was about the community. His neighbors were watching, and many of them had started to see things his way. They had started to understand that the HOA wasn't just about rules, it was about control. And they weren't going to let the HOA push them around anymore. He began to hear from more people in the neighborhood, people who had once been silent but were now speaking out. Some of them had been through the same kind of treatment from the HOA: threats, intimidation, and unfair fines. They had watched as he turned the situation into an opportunity, and now they were ready to support him. Word of the toll road was spreading, and it was starting to feel like the community was waking up. The man wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. But even with the support of his neighbors, he knew that the HOA wouldn't back down easily. They had already shown how far they were willing to go to get what they wanted. They had the resources, the power, and the connections. The man couldn't afford to let his guard down. The fight was far from over. But the more he thought about it, the more confident he became. The HOA had made a mistake. They had underestimated him, and now, they were going to see just how far he was willing to go to protect his land, his rights, and his community. The toll road wasn't just about money. It was about standing up for himself and everyone else in the neighborhood who had been pushed around. He wasn't going to let the HOA win. Not this time. The man had been expecting the HOA to fight back, but even he wasn't prepared for how hard they would come at him. The letter was just the beginning. The moment he received the legal threat from the HOA demanding that he remove the toll booths, he knew they would stop at nothing to shut him down. The HOA wasn't used to losing, and they certainly weren't used to being challenged like this. They had underestimated him, but now, with their power and resources, they were going to make sure he knew just how far they could push. The first sign of their retaliation came quickly. The man received another letter, this time much more formal and aggressive. It wasn't just a threat to remove the toll booths, it was a demand for him to cease all operations on the road, including the collection of tolls, or face immediate legal action. The letter claimed that the toll road violated the HOA's rules, citing various clauses about unauthorized commercial activity and property use. The man wasn't intimidated by the letter, but he knew the HOA meant business. They weren't going to just let him make money off their land, and they certainly weren't going to let him challenge their authority without a fight. The more the man thought about it, the more he realized that this wasn't just about the toll road, it was about control. The HOA was used to getting their way, dictating what people could and couldn't do. They had pushed him to this point, and now they were going to try to break him. He had to be ready. The next step in their retaliation came faster than expected. A group of HOA enforcers showed up at the gate. The man wasn't there when they arrived, but his neighbor, who had become one of his biggest supporters, called him immediately to tell him what was happening. The enforcers had shown up, demanding that the toll booths be shut down immediately. They claimed that they were following orders from the HOA board. The neighbor told him that they had tried to take down the toll booths themselves but hadn't been able to. They were threatening to call the police if the man didn't comply. This was it. The HOA was escalating the situation. The man knew he had to act quickly. If they succeeded in shutting down the toll road, it wouldn't just be a loss of money. It would be a loss of everything he had fought for. The HOA would have won. He couldn't let that happen. As soon as he heard about the enforcers, he contacted his lawyer, who advised him to stay calm and not take matters into his own hands. The last thing he needed was a confrontation that could be used against him. The lawyer suggested that he take the legal route, send a formal response to the HOA, and remind them of the legal rights he had to operate the toll road. The man knew the right thing to do was to stay calm and follow the legal process, but he also knew that time was running out. He had already seen how aggressive the HOA could be, and he wasn't about to let them bulldoze him into submission. He decided that he needed to fight back, legally, but with everything he had. The lawyer helped him draft a response to the HOA's letter, reinforcing his legal right to operate the toll road. He included documentation of the land zoning, the permits for the toll booths, and a detailed explanation of how the toll road was being managed according to the law. He sent the response to the HOA board, hoping that it would be enough to force them to back off. The man knew that the HOA wouldn't let this go easily, but he had to show them that he wasn't going to give up without a fight. As he waited for their response, the tension in the neighborhood grew. Word had spread quickly about the HOA's attempts to shut down the toll road. Some of his neighbors, who had initially been hesitant to support him, began to rally behind him. They saw what the HOA was doing, and they didn't like it. They began to speak out against the HOA's tactics, attending meetings and demanding that their voices be heard. The man's fight had become a rallying cry for the entire neighborhood. The HOA might have tried to intimidate him, but now they were facing an entire community ready to stand up against them. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. The HOA board didn't respond to his legal letter immediately. Instead, they made moves to escalate the situation. They sent a survey team to the toll gate, surveying the area and taking measurements as if they were preparing for some kind of legal action. The man knew this was a sign. They weren't giving up. The HOA was planning their next move, and he had to be ready for whatever they threw at him. But just when he thought the tension couldn't get any worse, something unexpected happened. The community, now fully behind him, began to take matters into their own hands. A few of his neighbors started organizing. They held meetings at the local community center, discussing how they could show the HOA that they wouldn't be intimidated. The more they met, the more they realized that they could fight the HOA together. They started gathering signatures to protest the HOA's actions, sending letters of support to the local government and even calling for a town hall meeting to address the issue. The HOA was used to being the voice of authority, but now they were seeing something they hadn't expected. A united community, standing up for their rights. As the man watched his neighbors begin to rally, he felt a renewed sense of strength. He wasn't alone anymore. This was no longer just his fight. It was the neighborhood's fight. The HOA had underestimated the power of the community, and they were about to find out just how strong a united front could be. The more he thought about it, the more determined he became. He wasn't just fighting for his toll road or his land. He was fighting for the future of his community, for the people who had been pushed around by the HOA for far too long. The HOA might have struck first, but now it was his turn. And he wasn't going to stop until they realized that they couldn't control him, or anyone else in this neighborhood. The man had been preparing for this moment for weeks. The HOA had thrown everything they could at him. Legal threats, intimidation, and a few sneaky moves designed to make him give up. But he wasn't backing down. He wasn't going to let them control him, his land, or his community. The toll road, once a simple response to the fence they'd put up, had turned into a symbol of resistance. He wasn't just fighting for the right to access his land anymore. He was fighting for the rights of everyone who had been bullied by the HOA. The HOA had made their move, and now it was time to take them on in court. The days leading up to the court date were filled with preparation. The man, along with his lawyer, went through every detail of the case, making sure that they had all their paperwork in order. They had already collected evidence proving the legal right to operate the toll road. The zoning laws, the property deeds, the permits, all of it was on his side. But still, the man couldn't shake the feeling that the HOA had more than just lawyers on their side. They had power, influence, and connections that went beyond legal matters. The man had done everything he could to be ready for this battle, but he knew it wasn't going to be easy. The day of the hearing arrived, and the man could feel the weight of the situation. He stood outside the courthouse, feeling a mixture of anxiety and determination. This wasn't just about a toll road. This was about everything: the right to live without fear of control, the right to stand up to an organization that had gotten away with too much for too long. When the man entered the courtroom, the tension in the air was palpable. The HOA's lawyer was already there, sitting at the other side of the room. The lawyer was a polished professional, well-dressed, and confident. The man could feel the weight of the legal battle bearing down on him. He wasn't used to this kind of thing. He had never been to court for anything serious before, but he wasn't going to let that intimidate him. He had the truth on his side. The hearing began, and the courtroom fell silent as the judge took his seat. The judge, an older man with a stern look on his face, surveyed the room before speaking. "This is a case regarding the toll road that the defendant has established on HOA property," the judge said, his voice calm but firm. "Both parties will have the opportunity to present their cases. We will proceed with the plaintiff's argument." The HOA's lawyer stood first, confident as ever. He spoke clearly, outlining the HOA's position. According to the lawyer, the toll road was an illegal business operation on HOA property. The man's actions, they claimed, violated the HOA's rules and zoning ordinances. The lawyer argued that the man had no right to charge for access to the road, even though it was part of his land. He called the toll road an unauthorized commercial activity, and said that it was disrupting the peace and safety of the neighborhood. The defendant has created a business out of what was intended to be a residential road, the lawyer said, his tone smooth and measured. This is not only a violation of HOA rules but a direct challenge to the authority of the community. The man listened quietly, his mind racing as he processed the lawyer's argument. It wasn't true. The toll road was not a business in the way they were describing it. It was a response to their attempt to block his access, and it was completely legal. His lawyer had already prepared the evidence that would show the toll road's legality, and now it was their turn to present their case. The man stood when it was his turn, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't have the smooth, practiced confidence that the HOA's lawyer had, but he had something far more powerful: the truth. "Your Honor," the man began, his voice steady but firm. "The HOA has no right to block my access to my property. The road that I am charging tolls for is my land. I've paid for it, I've maintained it, and I've followed every rule that the HOA set forth. The toll road is a response to the HOA's actions. They put up a fence and blocked my access to my own property. I'm not in violation of any laws. I'm just trying to get to my ranch." He paused for a moment, making sure his words were clear. He could feel the weight of the courtroom on him, but he wasn't going to back down. "The HOA cannot control my land like this. They've tried to use their power to intimidate me, to force me into submission, but I won't be bullied. The toll road is my right. I have the legal right to use my land as I see fit." The judge looked at him carefully, his expression unreadable. The courtroom was silent as the man finished speaking. The HOA's lawyer stood up to respond, but the judge interrupted. "I've heard enough," the judge said. "Both sides have made their arguments. I will take this into consideration and make my ruling shortly." The tension in the room was thick as the judge left the courtroom to deliberate. The man sat there, his thoughts racing. His heart was pounding in his chest. The HOA had put everything they had into trying to stop him, but he had fought back with everything he had. He had presented his case, backed up with evidence and the law. Now, it was up to the judge. After what felt like hours, the judge returned to the courtroom. He sat down at his desk and cleared his throat. The man felt the room fall silent, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. The judge looked at both sides before speaking. "I have reviewed the evidence," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The defendant has shown that the toll road is legally permissible under the circumstances. The HOA's actions in blocking the defendant's access to his property were improper and in violation of the rights of the landowner. The toll road will remain in place, and the HOA's claims will be dismissed." The words hit the man like a wave of relief. He had won. The toll road would stay, and the HOA had been forced to back down. The judge's ruling was a victory, not just for the man, but for everyone in the neighborhood who had ever been intimidated or pushed around by the HOA. As he left the courtroom, the man couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The fight wasn't over. He knew the HOA would try again. But for now, he had won. The toll road was legal, and the HOA's attempt to shut him down had failed. He had stood his ground, and it had paid off. The victory was sweeter than he could have imagined, and it felt like the first real step toward taking back control. The man knew this was just the beginning, but as he walked out of the courtroom, he felt a renewed sense of determination. He wasn't just fighting for his land anymore. He was fighting for something bigger, the right to live freely, without being controlled by anyone. After the court victory, the man felt a rush of relief, but it didn't last long. His win had set the stage for the next phase of his plan, and now the toll road was about to become a much bigger part of his life. The HOA's attempts to shut him down had only made him more determined to push forward. He had won the right to keep the toll booths, but now he had to make it work, not just as a legal victory but as a financial asset. The idea had started as a way to fight back, but now, it had become his lifeline. The toll booths were no longer just a way to take control back from the HOA. They were the key to his future. He couldn't afford to let them fail. The first few weeks after the ruling were slow, with only a handful of cars passing through the toll booths each day. It wasn't enough to make a substantial profit, but the man wasn't discouraged. He knew that this was just the beginning. He needed to spread the word and get more people to use the road. He started talking to his neighbors, encouraging them to use the road, to tell their friends and family that the toll road was open and ready for business. The more people who used the road, the more he could make. And the more successful it became, the harder it would be for the HOA to fight back. He put up signs at the entrance of the toll road, clearly stating the toll fee and the hours of operation. He even set up a website for the toll road, providing an easy way for people to pay online and check the status of the road. It was a small investment, but it paid off. Slowly but surely, the number of cars passing through the toll booth began to increase. What had started as a trickle of vehicles grew into a steady stream, and then, a flood. People who had once been skeptical of the toll road now saw its value. It was the only way to get to the main road, and the price was reasonable compared to the cost of driving miles around the D2. The man felt a sense of pride every time a car pulled up to the toll booth. It wasn't just about the money, It was about the fact that he had turned the HOA's roadblock into something that worked in his favor. He had taken a situation designed to ruin him and turned it into an opportunity. The success of the toll road wasn't just financial. It was a moral victory. The more the toll road succeeded, the more it sent a message to the HOA. They couldn't control him, and they couldn't control the community. He wasn't alone in this fight anymore. The neighbors who had once been too afraid to speak out now began to use the road regularly, and they told others about the toll road's success. Word spread through the local community, and the more people learned about it, the more the toll road became a symbol of resistance. The HOA couldn't do anything about it. Every toll paid was another slap in their face. But even as the toll road started to become a success, the man knew the HOA wasn't going to just give up. They had resources, connections, and power. They had been losing ground, but they would find another way to fight back. The man was prepared for that. He knew that the HOA would try to discredit him, to find some legal loophole or technicality to shut the toll road down. But he was ready. He had lawyers on his side, and he had the community behind him. The toll road wasn't just his, it was theirs, too. The next step was to expand. As the toll booths became more profitable, the man started thinking about how to make the road even more useful. He began considering adding more booths, more lanes, and improving the road's infrastructure. He saw the potential to create a system that would not only be a source of income but could help improve the community. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about showing the HOA that they couldn't control the future of this land. The more successful the toll road became, the more the HOA would realize that their grip on the community was slipping. They could keep trying to fight him, but the truth was clear. He had the support of the people, and they had made their choice. One morning, as the man checked the toll receipts, he realized something even more surprising. He had started to generate enough income to reinvest in his land. The toll road wasn't just paying for itself, it was helping to improve his ranch. He had been able to fix up the cabin, clear more land, and even plant new trees. The man felt a wave of satisfaction. The battle for his land was far from over, but this was a big win. Every time he looked at the toll road, he saw not just a financial asset but a symbol of his victory over the HOA. The road was his, and the community's. And the more successful it became, the more the HOA had to accept that they couldn't control everything. He was fighting back in a way they had never expected, and it was working. For the first time in a long time, the man felt a sense of peace. He was no longer fighting for survival. He was fighting for the future, for his land, his ranch, and his right to live freely. And every car that passed through his toll booths was a reminder that he had taken back control of his life. The success of the toll road had taken the man farther than he ever imagined. It had not only provided the income he needed but had given him something even more powerful, a sense of control. The HOA, which had once been able to push him around without any consequences, now found themselves in a position they weren't used to, on the defensive. The road he had transformed into a toll route wasn't just a personal victory. It was a statement, a symbol of his unwillingness to be controlled by their arbitrary rules. For a while, things had been calm. The traffic at the toll booths had steadily increased, and the community had supported him. Neighbors who had once been silent now spoke up, and more people began to use the toll road regularly. The HOA had made attempts to shut it down, but every time they sent letters or tried to intimidate him, the man stood his ground. He had the law on his side, and his community was behind him. However, deep down, he knew that this fight wasn't over. The HOA wasn't going to stop just because they had lost a few rounds. They were powerful, well-connected, and they had a history of getting what they wanted. The man had been waiting for the next move, and it came sooner than expected. One afternoon, he was sitting in his cabin when a car pulled up to the toll booth. The man was on his way to the gate when he noticed a black SUV parked nearby. A figure stepped out, wearing a sharp suit and looking every bit like someone who meant business. The man's heart sank. He knew who this was. The HOA had sent someone to handle things personally. The figure approached him as he stood near the toll booth. "I'm with the HOA," the man said without introduction. "We need to talk." The man immediately bristled. He had been waiting for this moment. He wasn't about to let them take back what he had worked so hard for. "What's this about?" the man asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "The toll road is here to stay. You tried everything to shut me down, and it's not going to work." The HOA representative gave a slow, almost pitying smile. "I understand that you've made your little venture work for now," the man said, his tone smooth and confident. "But this has gone far beyond what we expected. It's not about the toll booths anymore. The HOA has legal authority over these properties, including the land where you're running your toll road. It's time for you to remove it." The man shook his head, his anger rising. "You don't control everything here," he shot back. "I've got the law on my side. I've made sure everything is legal, and I'm not going to back down just because you show up here in your fancy suit. You can't scare me anymore." The HOA representative's smile faded, and his eyes hardened. "This isn't just about you or your toll road," he said coldly. "The HOA's reputation is at stake here. You've embarrassed us in front of the community. Your toll road is a threat to everything we've built. It's time to end this, once and for all." The man felt a chill run down his spine. He had expected this kind of threat, but hearing it so plainly made it feel real. The HOA wasn't just trying to stop him. They were trying to erase him, to wipe out everything he had built. "I'm not going anywhere," the man replied firmly. "You can't push me out. I've fought for my rights, and I'll keep fighting. If you want to take this to court, I'm ready. But I'm not backing down." The representative didn't respond immediately. He simply stood there, sizing the man up. The silence between them was thick with tension. The man could feel the weight of the situation. This wasn't just about the toll road anymore. This was about something bigger. The HOA was no longer about enforcing petty rules or forcing people into submission. This was about their pride, their control. And they weren't going to let him win. But the man wasn't about to give up. He had come too far, fought too hard, and built too much to back down now. He had won once in court, and he would win again. As the man stood there, facing the HOA representative, he realized something. The fight had never just been about the toll road. It was about taking control of his life, his future. The HOA had tried to dictate his path, and he had refused to let them. But now, the stakes were higher. This was the final confrontation, and he knew that whatever happened next would determine the rest of his life. The representative finally spoke, his voice low and filled with a hint of threat. "You don't want to make this harder than it has to be," he warned. "The HOA has connections. We can make things very difficult for you." The man didn't flinch. "You've already made things difficult," he said. "But I'm not going anywhere." The representative hesitated, clearly weighing his next words. Finally, he straightened up, looking the man squarely in the eyes. "You'll regret this," he said, and without another word, turned and walked back to his SUV. The man watched as the car drove away, a cold sense of finality hanging in the air. But despite the tension, the man felt something else. He felt stronger than ever before. The HOA had tried everything they could to control him, but they hadn't succeeded. This fight was far from over, but for the first time, he felt like he was winning. The final confrontation was just beginning, and he wasn't going to back down. Whatever came next, he was ready for it. He had made his stand, and he would not let the HOA take back what he had fought so hard for.